Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Madmouth, and we are looking for a loaded show. And folks, if you want to know how loaded this show is, I'll give you some really good words of wisdom. Grab a pen and paper when you go ahead and listen to this episode again. And if you decide that you want to go to your nearest retailer, don't hesitate to invest into a Rubik's Cube, because that's how complicated this broadcast is going to be. There is an awful lot to figure out. With that said, okay, I want to welcome the newest member of our team, John Shearer of Sideline Sports. And John, why don't you give everybody an overview and introduction of who you are?
Yeah, so I work with Sideline Sports. We were founded about a year and a half ago. We're now on DBNA television, on a couple other networks as well. And we cover the Super Bowl, we cover the NFL as a whole, and we cover a couple other professional leagues as well. It consists of three other members, mainly me and three other members. And then we have a laundry list of people under us, and they have shows as well. And I also was an intern over this past fall for Fox Sports 1340 Hopewell in my area, in the Virginia area. So I wrote for them. And then I also write for Fansided as well on the side. So I'm just kind of everywhere.
Well, we're glad to have you here, John, and we're going to have a very great show tonight. There's a lot to pack in, folks, so stick around for the ride. So for those of you wondering why I'm wearing a Jacksonville Jaguars hat and shirt, well, I took the track up to I-95 and watched the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Indianapolis Colts, and they still landed the number one pick because the Lions took care of the Green Bay Packers. Nevertheless, Jonathan Taylor didn't run as much as I thought he would run, and Carson Wentz is in deep trouble. So I don't think he got a glowing endorsement from his general manager today. So With that said, that's why I'm wearing the Jaguars attire today. Focal point of this broadcast, we're probably going to do this in 2 or 3 parts because there's an awful lot to go ahead and take in. Will be the NFL coaching carousel. So stay tuned for more updates and more broadcasts and more as we continue to uncover this thing called NFL coaching. So if you're looking for job security and you're looking for the Mike Tomlin contract, which is a lifetime contract, this isn't the sport to be. I do want to preface a couple of other things here as I get into the coaching carousel. I know that at the moment, Mike Tomlin is the only African-American coach. Don't worry, there are enough great candidates in this pool where there are going to be a lot more before this hiring cycle is over. So Rooney Rule, no big deal. Okay, it's just a matter of how we reshuffle the deck. All right, well, what I'm going to do right now to set the table for everybody is we're going to talk about all the openings. I'm going to lead off, and then I'm going to defer to my panel. We're going to talk first about the Miami Dolphins, one of the most surprising moves on Black Monday, letting go Brian Flores. And obviously, Greg, from what I understand, there was some friction between the general manager, the coach, and Tua Tagovailoa. Is that correct?
That is what I have read from multiple sources. My take on the situation is, this isn't some general office environment, an insurance company or something. I mean, professional sports, people are going to say stuff to each other. They're going to strong egos, need to have thick skin. And I think firing Flores was the wrong move. If it was possible, I'd fire the owner, but we all know that's not possible.
Well, I do know that Brian Flores the last 2 years was like 24 and 25. And, he did a marvelous job being able to get that team turned around in midseason. We'll obviously defer to you a little bit, Greg, but I do know that there was a little bit of friction. And when the general manager, the coach, and then the quarterback aren't on the same page, you got a little bit of problems there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out there and forecast and put some names out there for each and every team. And then we're going to go around the horn, as they say in baseball. So potential candidates for the Miami Dolphins, I like Eric Bieniemy, Doug Peterson, Kellen Moore, Brian Dayball. I like Brian Dayball probably more so than a lot of them because he worked with Tua over at the University of Alabama. So with that particular said, okay, we'll go on to the Chicago Bears. We talked about Brian Flores. Okay, well, I think that's a viable possibility. Everybody knows that Chicago is a defensive town. We always know about the monsters of the Midway. We got Brian Flores, Doug Peterson, Brian Dayball, Leslie Frazier. Let me go ahead and make a prediction first, okay, with each of them. And I'm going to say that I predict that Brian Dayball will get the Miami Dolphins job because he obviously coached the Buffalo Bills. And anytime you go ahead and see a coach a team twice, the familiarity factor comes into play. Brian Dayball is my prediction. We know that can change pretty well like northern weather. Now to the Bears. I'm going to go with Brian Flores unless for some reason he were to get snapped up by the Houston Texans. We'll talk about that later in the show. And if he doesn't, then Leslie Frazier would be the one that I would go with, because I know that you're talking defense in Chicago. On to the Denver Broncos. Okay, you've got Vic Fangio being ousted. Okay, and I think there's really only two legitimate candidates, maybe three. Eric Bieniemy again. I have to tie him to that division. Okay, if you're looking for a guy who's an incredible offensive mind, he got a. Then the Broncos got a steady dose of the Kansas City Chiefs twice. Again, the familiarity factor comes into play. I know the other candidates that I'm looking at will be Nathaniel Hackett. If you're looking to pry Aaron Rodgers away, go ahead and bring on Nathaniel Hackett. And another outside possibility would be Dan Quinn. So far I've spoken about the Miami Dolphins. We've spoken about the Chicago Bears. And again, my prediction for the Broncos is Eric Bieniemy. On to the Minnesota Vikings. You've got, this one could go a lot of different ways. Once again, Brian Dayball into the mix, Brian Flores, Andre Patterson, who's the Vikings assistant head coach and co-defensive coordinator. If you're looking for an internal candidate, you can always throw Marvin Lewis into the discussion. He's the voice of stability, and he did a pretty good job with the Cincinnati Bengals. Leslie Frazier, who used to coach there. And of course, Kellen Moore's name is being bannered around. Believe it or not, I'm going to actually predict that Marvin Lewis would get this job, because I think that to me, he seems like an intriguing choice and a guy who's been around the block an awful lot. So he's my prediction there. Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I had an opportunity to talk to Daryl Bevell over the weekend, and he did a fine job going 1-3 under some tough circumstances with the Jaguars. I think there was a sense of calm in the building when I was up there. But we'll talk about the potential candidates. Byron Leftwich, which I know obviously would be a popular choice in the area, used to play quarterback there and played for a lot of years. And then you also have Jim Caldwell, Daryl Bevell, Doug Peterson, and now another name being thrown out there is Bill O'Brien. The X factor being Trent Baalke. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Jim Caldwell should be a guy that should be looked at the Jacksonville opening. And the reason why I like Jim Caldwell is we all know what happened when the Lions let him go. Okay, you lost that sense of calm. And I think that he's the type of guy who's a very calming influence, been around the block, knows how to get along with people. So I've got Caldwell going to the Jaguars. The New York Giants. Well, let's bring back the Rubik's Cube situation here, because I don't think I'm going to get this one right. And anybody does, more power to them. But we'll talk about the Giants nonetheless. Okay, Brian Dayball is another guy who could make that trip down from upstate New York to the Big Apple. Doug Peterson, Eric Bieniemy, and Raheem Morris, who obviously is doing a good job at the Rams. But my prediction there actually would be Doug Peterson to go to the Giants. I think they can use an experienced hand out there, somebody that's won a Super Bowl, and they're very familiar with them on the East Coast. Let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, as you remember, when we had this broadcast a few weeks ago and John Gruden got let go, I predicted that Rich Bisaccia should be the guy. And I am not backtracking on this one by any means, because it's the first time he's been a head coach in his 39 years. And the Raiders became the first team in 60 seasons to make the playoffs after midseason coaching change. I really do believe that Rich Bisaccia deserves the job, and I'm going to stay with it. But if he doesn't get hired, again, I'm going back to Eric Bieniemy. My goodness, Eric, you're getting it on airtime tonight. And then the last opening here, the one that just took place, would be the Houston Texans. Now I hear that there's talk from Adam Schefter that Jared Mayo, who's 35 years of age, has the inside track on the job. But when I went out there and communicated with Sean Salisbury, the former NFL quarterback, on LinkedIn, I felt because of the Nick Caserio factor that Brian Flores should get the job, or the Texans should go back. They were interested in Eric Bieniemy. He should be considered heavily for this. Now, with that said, okay, I think the one thing they're trying to do with this coaching hire is they're both looking to try to get Deshaun Watson back into good graces. Now, I know there's only one baseball person on the program, okay, Rick Curti, unless there's a few other people that want to become one. But I remember many years with the Detroit Tigers when they let Les Moss go and brought on Sparky Anderson. And we all saw how that worked out in 1984 with the Detroit Tigers. And another, if you want another Patriot candidate to throw in there, although I don't think it's realistic, would be Josh McDaniels. I think Josh McDaniels is waiting for the Patriots job to come open when the time does come that Belichick does step aside. So I know that I've uncovered an awful lot here. Okay. And of course, the future of Pete Carroll is still undecided as he goes ahead and meets with other Seattle people. I'm going to throw a few other names out there that I may or have not mentioned, and then we're going to go with Greg. First of all, I've talked about Marvin Lewis. Todd Bowles is another guy that could get consideration. Raheem Morris, I just mentioned. Kevin O'Connell with the LA Rams. Mentioned Josh McDaniels. Another name worth mentioning would be Patrick Graham, the Giants defensive coordinator. Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator for the Cardinals. Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator for the 49ers. And Matt Eberfloss for the Colts. Kind of wonder if the Jaguars would hire him now after what they just did to him on Sunday, but we'll leave that subjective for those minds to wander. All right. Well, now that I've said a mouthful here, Greg Fuchs, you're going to give me a break and you're going to give me your take on each and every one of these.
All right. A lot to digest there. A couple things you just mentioned. Josh McDaniels, is he the coach in waiting in New England? I want to say yes, but I don't think Belichick's ever going to retire. So unless he's willing to wait 5 or 10 years. And I think Todd Bowles may be the coach in waiting in Tampa. I'm not sure how much longer Arians will coach there. In regards to the 8 openings, I'll start with the Dolphins. When I look at coach positions, regardless of the team, I say, what part of the team do they really need to fix? For the Dolphins, they need to fix the offense. And it's more than just Tua. It's the offensive line, it's the running backs, it's the play calling. But that doesn't mean you need to hire an offensive coach, because you could bring in a very good overall head coach or a defensive coach and bring in a good offensive coordinator. So you never know. If I'm talking to a head coach, all right, who's your staff going to be? And that may affect who I hire as the head coach. That said, Dolphins, I would bring back their entire defensive staff, regardless who the coach is. And the 2 names that I like there are Doug Peterson, because he's an offensive guy, quarterback guy, and he has head coaching experience. I think the last 4 Dolphins coaches have all been rookie head coaches. Maybe it's time to hire a head coach with experience. So I might go with him as my number 1. Number 2, Brian Dayball that you mentioned. I mean, he's got the connections to he knows the Dolphins from playing him 2 times every year, and he's an offensive guy. So, and if he keeps the Josh Boyer as the defensive coordinator, he can just focus on the offense. All right. New York Giants. I've heard both of those same 2 names mentioned with the Giants. I can't believe it took the Giants so long to fire Joe Judge. I mean, that guy was just an embarrassment. I mean, the Lions and Texans, they weren't very good this year, but at least they played hard every week. At least they tried some creative play calling. So I think Peterson or Dayball will end up with the Giants. The Bears, it could be a lot of people. I think Flores is going to end up in Houston. So maybe Harbaugh if he's interested, but I'm not sure what Harbaugh wants to do. There's a team got a young quarterback with a bad offense. So once again, I would go with an offensive guy there. All depends who gets hired first and second. You know, Brian Leftwich, Eric Bieniemy, all good offensive guys. Denver. Thing about Denver, they need to fix the quarterback position. The rest of their roster is very solid. If they were fortunate enough to get a Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, they automatically become a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. But they have a lot of talent on that offense, but they can't seem to get out of their way. So I would go with an offensive guy there. Eric Bieniemy would be great. He gets to play him 2 years. You should be familiar with the roster. Jacksonville, I don't have a real feel for their situation. Brian Leftwich might make sense. Young guy, you can keep him for a while. Quarterback, you need someone who can work with Lawrence, so he might be a good fix there. Minnesota is another team that has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but their record never reflects that. So they need somebody to, I don't know, just change the culture in that locker room. Could be an offensive or defensive guy. I mean, sometimes you look at the offense on that team and you see Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Thielen, and you go, they should be scoring 30 plus points every game. And sometimes they just don't do it. So I'd get an offensive guy in there. We've talked about most of the offensive guys. So whoever, like I said, whoever gets hired first, second, some people need to make up their decisions quickly if they feel strongly about some of these guys. Las Vegas, I think
Well,
Versace stays there.
Greg, let me interrupt you for a moment. Okay, we know you're talking about offensive guys. I want you to try to give me a name from some of the lists that we've talked about. A name. We're not holding you to it because we all know we're going to look stupid anyways in about a week or two.
Well, if I go with Peterson in Miami, Dayball in the Giants, Leftwich in Jacksonville. Who's that leave? Bieniemy in Denver. Who's that leave? Minnesota. Who's left for the offensive guys here? You got the guy from Green Bay. You got McDaniels from San Francisco. Yeah, not sure. Maybe Minnesota goes with the defensive guy. I mean,
Defense needs to get fixed.
Right. Okay, continue on.
so maybe Leslie Frazier. He's already on the staff, right? And that leaves Houston. I think I already said, I think Flores is going to go to Houston.
Okay.
So I think that's all 8 of them.
Okay. All right. Well, next up here is Rick Curti.
Okay, well, Miami, I think it'll be Dayball. I think he'll go there because there's the connections there, and he could work with Tua. The Raiders, I'm gonna go on a limb. I love Basaccio. He should be coach of the year, in my opinion, for what he has done. But I don't think they're gonna keep him. I think they want a big name, big splash. So I really do think Harbaugh's gonna go there. I really do, and he's already had interest about going to the Raiders. So I think Harbaugh's going to go back to the pros and go back to the Raiders. The Vikings, I'm going to say Kellen Moore. I think you're going to get a young coach. It's a Cowboys, and his name has been floated around for a while. So I like Kellen Moore. For the Texans, I think it's going to be Flores. He was people were just so upset when he got fired. I was surprised because I thought he did enough to turn that team around, and they played very, very well down the stretch, and he did have a winning record. So I think Flores for the Texans. See who else. I think the Giants, I think they're going to be the one that's going to take a little longer than most of them. I know they want to go with the GM. So I think Peterson will go there. I think they're going to get an experienced head coach, someone who's won a Super Bowl. I think the fans will be happy to have Peterson there. He's a good coach. I liked him with the Eagles. I was sad to see him go, but I think he's going to go back to East Coast and go back with the Giants. See who else is on that list. Let's see. Who else is on there?
Did you ask
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville. Ooh, that's going to be a tough one. I think that's a job that people want to avoid, to be quite honest with you. But I'm going to say Leftwich. I think they're going to have a guy that's based in Florida. He played there. And I think they'll just be happy to get anyone. And because Urban Meyer's gone, it was what a nightmare it was with him, And who else am I missing? Oh, yeah, Denver. I think it'll be the enemy. I think that Denver is a good team. They just need a quarterback, and I don't know why John Elway gets ignored. This is his fault. I mean, he's a quarterback. He should have been getting a quarterback. They have been just bad, ever since they won that Super Bowl. And to me, that's a good job right there to have, because they're not bad at all. They just need quarterback. So I like the enemy with Denver.
Hey, one name we overlooked, and I think he gets one of these 8 jobs, is Dan Quinn.
Yeah,
Maybe he goes to Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, Dan Quinn's
I've heard Denver too, but they need offense.
You stole my thunder, Greg.
Only steal it from the best.
Denver keeps focusing on
comeback.
Denver keeps focusing so much on a defensive coaches. They need an offensive coach. They need help with that quarterback situation. It's been a mess. But I keep hearing Dan Quinn is another possibility for Denver, but I'd go with the enemy.
Okay. All right, you got them all, Rick?
Yep.
All right. On to the new kid on the block, Mr. John Shearer.
Yeah. So Miami, I think what ends up happening, and I don't want it to happen, but if I say what I think happens, I think Vance Joseph ends up as the Miami Dolphins head coach. I wouldn't want that, I don't think that's a good idea at all. But I think that Greer absolutely loves Vance Joseph, and he was already on the Dolphins staff a couple years ago. For whatever reason, they've interviewed him. They're going to interview him again. I've heard that they're going to give him a second shot at an interview. That's the guy that Greer absolutely loves. It shouldn't happen because you're going to be in the same position you were in with Flores, but he's not as good of a head coach. However, I think they should go with either the kid for San Francisco. Is it McDaniels? That guy, I mean, they said he might be the brightest mind in the league. Or Dayball. I think that one of those two would be perfect because, like you guys said, you got to fix the offense. For the Raiders, I think they got to stick with Bisaccia. I think you have to stick with him. I mean, I don't see any way you don't go with a guy that dealt with all those arrests, dealt with the John Gruden stuff, took over and led the team to the playoffs. You beat the Colts, knocked them out 2 weeks ago. You went and beat the Chargers this past week, knocked them out. Like, you've been playing for your life for 4 weeks in a row, and you've just been winning, and nobody's been paying attention. And you knocked two teams out of the playoffs that look like they're going to the playoffs back-to-back weeks. Like, the Raiders need to be given their credit. And when they go and beat the Bengals, maybe people will start paying attention to how good of a job that this guy has done. So I think that he definitely should keep the job. That's just insane if he doesn't. That job, like you guys said, no coach has ever done that. Like, what coach can you think of that's done that in the middle of the season, got the team to the playoffs? So for the Bears, I have to dispute your argument, I guess, Scott, when it comes to Flores going to the Bears. The only reason I don't see that working is he'd be in the same situation he was in Miami. Young quarterback that he obviously doesn't know how to take care of quarterbacks. We haven't seen it yet. And he's going to have the same exact situation. Fields is raw, kind of like Tua, a little bit raw. I think Fields is a little bit more unpolished so far, but I think Fields would be really good one day. But I don't think him and Flores would match up at all. I think that would be a terrible, terrible match. So I can't see that happening. For Chicago, I mean, honestly, I think Jim Harbaugh would be perfect for that type of town, that type of city, with how much they love defense and how hard Harbaugh gets his guys to play. I think he'd be a perfect fit for there. And I think he could do a really good job with Justin Fields. I think he could do really good. I think for the Jaguars, going to the Jaguars, I have to say, I think it's going to be Bill O'Brien. This is a Jaguars thing to do. And I think I've heard that name a lot recently since Monday. Bill O'Brien seems to be the leading candidate in Jacksonville, and they seem to, for whatever reason, love him. They seem to want to pair him and Balky up. I don't know why. There's people that are turning down the job in Jacksonville because of Balky. But Bill O'Brien, the one guy, I think he would take that job despite Balky. And this is what the Jaguars do, right? I mean, part of me thinks that Khan eventually wants to get the team to London. So why not be terrible enough until we can get you to London, and then we'll start being good. So that's what I think is going to happen in Jacksonville. Minnesota, I think they got to hire an offensive guy. I think, like you guys said, Kellen Moore fits perfectly with what they're trying to do. I think he could maximize that offense. They'll get one more year with Kirk Cousins, and then they'll finally move on and try and get a real quarterback. No offense to Kirk Cousins, but he can put up the stats, but he's not winning games. Like, he's not a winner. Like, we saw it in Washington. He can put up the stats, but when push comes to shove, he just doesn't get the job done. So I think that they'll bring in more, and then after a year, they'll finally go and get their guy. The Giants, I think Doug Peterson makes the most sense. Like you guys said, I wouldn't necessarily label him a Super Bowl winner because I think that was more Frank Reich did the job leading that team than it was Doug Peterson, because I think Reich got the most out of Carson Wentz. I think he got the most out of Nick Foles, more than anybody could get out of either of those two quarterbacks, because everywhere else those guys have gone, those guys haven't been very good. So I think that was more Reich, but still I like Peterson hiring. He knows that division. I think that fits. And then the last one I didn't touch on would be Denver. Denver's hard. I mean, I think they go with another defensive guy. And I think it's probably Dan Quinn. I think they should go offense, but they're going to end up going like at the end Quinn. And that's what I think it happens. And I think there's more eventual openings, but that's for another time.
All right, did I hear you mention Houston? I'm trying to make sure I,
Yeah, he did.
I don't think I touched Houston. So
okay.
Houston, that's hard because everybody keeps saying Brian Flores, and I think he's going to get a job. I don't think Eric Bieniemy gets a job. For whatever reason, people just don't hire this guy. I think he should. I think he's fantastic. I think he'd be a great head coach. For whatever reason, whether it's the Rooney Rule or he just doesn't interview well or whatever, like for some reason he doesn't get hired, but he should, because I think he'd be a fantastic head coach. But every year we go through this song and dance with Eric Bieniemy, and I think it's going to happen again where he's the one left out. So I think it's probably Flores, but don't put Flores in there because of Watson, because Watson's never playing another down for that organization, even if Flores comes. I just don't see that happening. So that's my list.
Now I heard the candidate that came out earlier, as I alluded to, was Jared Mayo. He's 35 years of age. So I don't know how serious he is. Steve, I know when we get to you in a moment, you know a little bit more about Jared Mayo. So, but we'll go ahead to Mel Farr. Okay, Mel, I know there's a lot to process here. And you know what, John, I have no problem with anybody disagreeing with me on this show. Everybody has a voice. Okay. Yep. I mean, whether or not Flores gets the job up in Chicago, I know that they like to go with defense up there. Leslie Frazier is a guy that I look at as an alternative. My only question with Jim Harbaugh is, will he actually leave Michigan? And that's the whole thing.
I think so.
Do you? Well, that's okay.
Yeah, I think he's itching to get back to the NFL. And not to interrupt you, but I think he's done everything he can in college. I mean, they got to where they got to in the playoffs this year. They were nowhere close to Georgia. Like, nowhere close to beating Georgia. Like, that team, Georgia was on another level. And I think that he realizes that they're not going to win a national championship with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart around. And I think he's always wanted to be in the NFL, and he got ran out of the NFL. And I think he's proven himself, and it's his time to come back.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's great. What I love about what we're doing so far, and I know we have Steve and Mel to go, is I like it when we all have contrasting opinions of what's going on. The whole objective behind this broadcast is we want to make sure with each and every part is we want everybody to think about what there is out there, because there are an awful lot of layers here that'll be uncovered over the next 14 to 21 days, especially as 6 teams get knocked out this weekend and more the following weekend and more candidates become available. With that said, I'm going to hand the ball off over to Mel Farr. And Mel, go ahead. We got 8 teams to go. What have you processed so far, or what do you want to produce?
Yeah, I haven't really looked at it that much. The one thing that I take away from it is, when Flores, the one thing that really stunned me was when Flores got fired. And the reason being is, I'm listening to ownership and he's saying he didn't see the team trending in the right direction or something, whatever the case may have been when he decided to get rid of him. And I've heard what you guys have said, and I've heard the same things as well. There was some kind of disagreement between him and the general manager. But the guy won 7 games in a row. They start out 1-7. He wins 7 games in a row, and they win 8 of the last 9. Now, if that's not a team trending in the right direction, then I don't know what is. And so it's kind of disheartening, especially when you see it happen. For me, particularly to coaches of color, you always see this happen. Now, we're in this cycle again. You hear a lot of the same old characters' names being called up again, get the retreads, and some of the names are good and some of the names are not so good. I'm glad to hear some of the names like Leslie Frazier and even Vance Joseph. I know, some people aren't really thrilled about hearing his name, but I mean, he didn't get an opportunity. We had to shot at Denver. I think he got 1 year. I think Leslie Frazier got 1 year. I'm glad to see they're Todd Bowles. I mean, I think these guys are great coaches, but they just, the Jets, nobody can win at the Jets. Nobody's won at the Jets. It's just a dysfunctional franchise. And I think, you're talking about Bieniemy, and he may not get hired in this cycle. And sometimes not getting hired in a particular cycle is not a bad thing, because you want to go to the right situation. It has to be the right situation. And I think, Dan Quinn's name has been brought up, and I know he turned down an interview with Jacksonville. But he helped Kellen Moore prepare for an interview with Jacksonville. He just realized that that's just not the right opportunity for him. I think a lot of these coaches, they're so excited about having the opportunity to be a head coach, and they take the job. And, if you don't have a quarterback, and, we talked about, you talked about Denver, and that the one thing that they need is a quarterback. They haven't been able to get as a quarterback. Well, it's not that easy, because if it was, everybody would have one, right? Obviously, it's just not that easy. It's you're gambling every time you go into the draft and you draft one of these quarterbacks high. You have to, sometimes you have to develop guys. And nobody's willing to do that in this day and age. They're willing to develop quarterbacks. So having said all that, I don't know who are the coaches that are going to get hired. I can't really say I know. I can say what fit for me feels right, I guess. And, in Jacksonville, I'd like to see Jim Caldwell get another opportunity. And I think that'd be a good opportunity. I think that'd be a good place for him. And I think he'd be a calming influence there, from what they had. You had a guy who was in there like the Tasmanian devil, and you get a calming influence like a Jim Caldwell. I think that would be a good situation for Jim. And I think it'd also be a good situation for the players there. Miami, I hadn't really thought much about Miami, to be honest with you. The problem there is going to be the quarterback, and you're going to have to get a guy there who is willing to, who understands that ownership and the general manager want Tua to be the quarterback, and that's going to be your quarterback. So I heard Dayball's name being mentioned. That sounds like a logical person to go down there, because he coached him before. So that sounds pretty logical. Chicago, I think Harbaugh is going to leave, and I think he's going to go to Chicago. I think that's one of the jobs that he would leave Michigan for. I think the Michigan job came up for him at just the right time when things weren't working well in San Francisco, and that job came up and he took that job. He's done all that he can do there at Michigan. And I think he would probably prefer to be in the NFL, and I think he would probably prefer to be in the NFC versus the AFC, so he's not battling his brother and keeping him out of the Super Bowl. So that makes sense to me. The Giants, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know who would want that job. You got to deal with the quarterback. You got to be willing to accept that Daniel Jones is your quarterback. I don't know. Doug Peterson, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, he's a guy who's proven that he can win in this league. They know him very well, obviously, from having to play them twice a year. I heard Mara talking today that nobody that they've spoken to or reached out to has turned them down. So I mean, I guess the job is attractive in a sense, but there's a lot of problems with that team. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and you have to be given the time in which to do that. And a lot of these owners just don't seem to have the patience to give these guys the time to make the necessary changes. Because when you decide to change general managers and coaches, that means you're changing not just all the player personnel people, all those guys are going to be changing too, because you're bringing in a new guy. He's going to have a set philosophy, what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, the type of players that they want to have, whether they want to run a 3-4 defense or a 4-3 defense, or whether they want to, they want to be a run option team, or they want to be a power running team. So everything changes from your scouting department, your whole roster. So it takes time in order to put all those things into place. Denver, who are some of the names you guys are throwing around? I know I heard the enemy's name a couple of times.
Dan Quinn.
Yeah, Dan Quinn, Eric Bieniemy, and
I think
Hackett is a name I threw out there.
If Dan Quinn were to leave Dallas, I think that would be an interesting place for him. Even though you say, well, the defense wasn't necessarily the problem, wasn't that great. The problem, and I think Dan has probably learned, is if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. So I don't know if that's going to be as attractive job as the one he has right now.
So Mel, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think, I know he said Dan Quinn, do you think Dan Quinn's waiting out that job in Dallas? Do you think that, because I don't think Mike McCarthy has a long leash, and I think that one of those two guys could wait out that job and they could get it sooner rather than later. I really think if they have the first round exit, I think that's a name to look for that could be could be a surprising exit. And one of those two guys wait on that job. I'm just saying, because of Mike McCarthy, that was last year. They didn't exactly like how that went. And the expectations are Super Bowl in Dallas. It's not first round or second round. It's Super Bowl. So I'm just saying, think about that.
That's an interesting thought. I never even thought about that. I mean, they did play well for him the one game that he did coach when Mike was with a COVID protocol. But even perhaps the offensive coordinator from Dallas may go to Denver. I think I've heard his name linked with that job. Kellen Moore. That might be an interesting opportunity, or he might be, head coach and waiting there in Dallas. I don't know. If I'm a young coach, I'm probably wanting to get away from Jerry Jones and be able to establish myself somewhere else, because he's just such a controlling figure there. The Raiders, I think it's going to be very difficult to get rid of the guy that's in place right now.
Right.
Now, although, I've heard, talk about, coaching changes middle of the year, none of them have made the playoffs. Well, this was kind of a different situation. John Gruden didn't get let go because of his performance. I mean, the Raiders were doing very well. I think they were 7-1 at the time, or I don't know, that they were very, very good at the time in which John Gruden was let go. All he had to do is just hang on, just stay in between the ditches, just keep this thing going. But I think he's done a good job, and I think the players have played hard for him. And I think he deserves an opportunity to see what he can do with that team. I really do think he deserves that opportunity. He's already in place. The other people there in place. Everything is there. That way you don't have to overhaul your whole system. You're not having to get David Carr to learn a whole other system again. You keep the continuity within the franchise. So I think he deserves that opportunity. Did I miss somebody?
Yeah, you got Houston.
I think, and I don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson. That whole thing when it went down never made sense to me, how he thought he should be involved in who the general manager was going to be. I don't know who put that in his head that he was going to have a say in who the general manager was going to be. So I don't know how that happened. And then everything went downhill from there. So I don't know if my problem's with him or I don't know. But I mean, if Brian Flores was released because he wanted the Dolphins to go after Deshaun Watson, then it would only make sense that if Houston wants to try to keep Deshaun Watson and they're not able to get what they feel that what they want for him, then it would only make sense to hire Flores. It would only make sense to hire him because then that's somebody that Deshaun would want to play for. Now I'm hearing this Jared Mayo just like everybody else for the first time. Only makes sense because of who the general manager is that he would be an option for that job. But again, he also knows Flores as well. So it only makes sense to me that Brian Flores will get that job.
Yeah, it's funny how you say that, Mel. I've always mentioned all week long as this whole thing unfolded that I thought Flores, if he didn't get the Chicago job, Nick Caserio, and Steve, we're going to go to you in a moment, would be the logical connection between Brian Flores and Nick Caserio with obviously Deshaun Watson. Now, I know, John, you don't particularly agree, which is okay. We appreciate it.
I don't think he's ever playing for that franchise, not after how they
and you know what? That's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
But another thing Mel brought up, which I really like too, Mel, is that Kellen Moore, Jerry Jones paid him more money to stay with Dallas for being an offensive coordinator. So the coach in waiting theory that you're talking about, Mel, in Dallas with Kellen Moore would make a lot of sense, especially when the owner likes you. So, I mean, I know Deshaun Watson has said he never will, but you know what? Let's face it, Houston doesn't look like they're going to give him away for nothing either. So I've seen, they always say never, even though, that can happen from time to time as well. But that's what we're going to be talking over the next couple of weeks about it, how this whole thing plays out. But let me tell you, John, I appreciate everything you're bringing to the table.
And just think about how loyal Jerry Jones was. Just a last touch on this. Just think about how loyal he was to Jason Garrett. And Jason Garrett eventually got that job. And he was loyal to him for a very long time until he finally had to get rid of him. So Jerry Jones is a loyal person. And if he believes in you like he believes in Kellen Moore could wait that out. I'm just saying.
Excellent points. All right, Mr. Balestrieri, I know you're waiting there patiently while we try to go out there and throw this insanity your way. So, all right, Steve, you got a lot to digest here. I'm going to give you the names of the teams, and then you go ahead and as I give them to you one at a time. All right, Steve? All right. Miami
Go
Dolphins.
for it.
Who's going there?
Who?
Miami Dolphins.
You know, going back to what Mel said earlier, I was shocked that they let Brian Flores go. B-Flo, he inherited one of the worst teams in football 3 years ago. And, you know, the ownership wanted him to tank, and he refused to do it. And, you know, his players never stopped believing in him. And that was the thing that stuck with me. You know, when a team loses 7 in a row and they're like 1-7, a lot of teams just pack it in. His players played hard for him. Then they turned around and won 7 in a row. He won 8 of his last 9 games. You know, 3 years ago, the Dolphins were a laughing stock, and they've, you know, for the first time in what, 18 or 19 years, they have back-to-back winning seasons. I just thought that was a really stupid move on leadership there. You know, with Miami, you have to deal with the ownership, and, you know, are they going to stick with Tua? I don't know. I mean, they seem like they flip-flop, but the guy that I would have replaced wasn't Flores, would have been the GM. But seeing that, I think, you know, an offensive coach will probably have to go in down there. And, you know, it would seem like on paper, Brian Dayball's the guy. Okay. You know, he's worked with Tua. He's a really good offensive mind. They have a great defense already in place. It seems like that'll be the place to go. But we know the owner loves Harbaugh. He tried to hire Harbaugh in 2011. So, you know, are they going to try to entice him down to South Florida? And it'll be something to watch. But I think Dayball would be a really good choice there. I'm going to jump over to Jacksonville. Jacksonville and Houston are the two teams right now that if I'm a young coach, I stay the heck away from.
Okay.
I have a good friend who has a very, very close inside look at what goes on inside of Jacksonville and their soccer team in England. And the ownership there is all very, very much involved. And they're very much into analytics. And they tend to get away from football decisions from their football people due to their analytics people. If I'm a young head coach, I don't want to go there. If you know, they need a guy in Jacksonville that's an experienced guy that's not going to listen to that. He's going to put the ownership. Hey, you hired me to run football operations, and I'm going to run it. So, like a guy like Doug Peterson, I think would be a good choice for the Jacksonville Jaguars because he has some, he has some experience, and I think he'd be good for Trevor Lawrence. But they need a lot of help in Jacksonville. They're a long way from being, having that ship righted. Houston, you mentioned Gerard Mayo. Mayo's only 35. He was the Patriots' de facto defensive coordinator a couple of years ago. He still is, for that matter. I mean, him and Steve Belichick call the plays. I think Steve Belichick is kind of like the guy right now. But he's only 35. He retired at 31. He's a really smart guy. He's mature beyond his years. I remember when he was a rookie linebacker for the Patriots, Teddy Bruschi at the time said, he's an old soul, that he, carries himself as a coach on the field already, as a 22-year-old rookie linebacker. So if, he has that, inside track with Nick Caserio. But if I'm Mayo, I don't want that Houston job because there's so much. That place is a mess because of another New England person that went there, Jack Easterby. That's just an absolute disaster right now. And then you have Deshaun Watson's situation. I mean, do we even know if he's going to play for Houston ever again? I don't know. I mean, it could be a guy like Mayo or, you guys mentioned Flores, but honestly, if Belichick retired tomorrow, I'd want Flores rather than Josh McDaniels on the Patriots because when he coached there as the defensive coordinator, he was beloved by the players. They just absolutely loved the way he coached. Same thing down in Miami. But I don't know if either one of those guys really wants that job. I know they have a close relationship with Casario. I think they're going to go outside and bring somebody in that is not even on our radar right now.
So you're not going to venture a prediction with Houston right now?
I'm gonna pass on Houston because I think they're gonna go in a different direction from somebody like I said, that's really outside our radar, because I don't know if any of these guys really want to go down to Houston right now.
Okay, I respect that. No, that's okay, Steve. I mean, nobody.
In Minnesota, I kind of like Dan Quinn for that. The defense needs to get fixed. They have a lot of weapons on offense, and I do agree. I mean, I can't remember exactly who said it. Kirk Cousins puts up the numbers, but they never seem to put it together, as a team. But that defense does need to get fixed. So I think Dan Quinn might be a good name for that one. Chicago, I think if Harbaugh don't go to Miami, I think that's the place. That would be an attractive job for him. I think he could work well with Fields. And again, that's a team that needs a lot of help.
So who are you going with in Chicago if it isn't Harbaugh?
Yeah, I'd say Harbaugh. That's probably who I think would take that job.
Okay.
The Giants is another. I mean, you don't know who the GM is, and until they hire the GM, I mean, I think that's going to depend on who they hire as a coach. You can't hire a coach without hiring a GM first, in my opinion, because you have to go. The GM and coach have to be on the same sheet of music, and unless they're going to hire a guy that's going to run the whole shebang. Going back, I don't know who they. That's a good question. Who the Giants would hire, because again, they have I think 7 players who are aging that are owed over $10 million.
And the Kenny Galladay contract is just an albatross, so that's not fun to have to deal with. 0 touchdowns this year.
Yep, and I think there's 6 or 7 players, right, that are owed over $10 million, and so free agency for them is going to be really tough. I mean, they're not going to be big spenders in free agency this year, and I think the Giants might go a defensive guy, but I'm again, until they hire the GM, we really won't have a good feeling for that, because I think that's going to drive the train there.
Yeah.
Denver, I don't understand why anyone hasn't hired Eric Bieniemy. We hear his name every year, then no one hires him, and it's the same situation. I maybe he doesn't interview well. I don't know.
That's what I've heard, but that could be an excuse just not to hire him.
But why wouldn't you hire a guy who runs the offense as well as he does? Kansas City.
Some people think Andy Reid runs the offense.
So. Yeah, but Bieniemy, you always see him in the ear of the players on the sidelines, and they have some talented guys. But he's the guy that's their offensive coordinator.
And to Greg's,
I don't know.
To Greg's point, Andy Reid was a terrible time management until he got Eric Bieniemy. That's when he finally figured out how to do time management. So put the pieces together. You know what I'm saying? Put those pieces together, because he struggled with that before Bieniemy.
Oh, Andy was terrible at clock management. I think the only guy worse than him at clock management might be Mike McCarthy. So.
I think you'll get a unanimous vote there. I guess if I suppose with Doug Peterson, I hear Raheem Morris might be an interesting name with the Giants as well. And I know
Leslie Frazier might be a good choice for the Giants, because he's a really good defensive coach. He's one of those guys that has a lot of respect from the players. And, I think that's what the Giants need right now. That is right now it's not an attractive position, but I mean, the New York Giants, you're in the, media capital of the world. I mean, that's a great organization.
Do you think if Russell Wilson leaves, I think Pete Carroll gets the can in Seattle. And I think if Pete Carroll gets the can, do you think maybe the Giants? Because that's stability. That's discipline. That's somebody that you're going to listen to. That's somebody that could fix the offense.
You're saying Pete Carroll
Maybe
to the
Pete
Giants?
Carroll.
I don't know. I hadn't even thought of Pete Carroll.
Because I don't think he stays if they get rid of Russell Wilson. I think they completely start over.
If I'm Pete Carroll, I retire. If I get
Yeah, I
fired.
think he's gonna retire.
But look at his energy on the sidelines. Like he's running up and down sidelines at his age. Like I don't think
my
he's done.
jaw hurts watching him chew gum.
Well,
Yeah, I think Carroll will go somewhere.
Steve, let's talk a little bit about the Minnesota opening. Do you have any thoughts about the Minnesota opening? I know that one could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and again, I think Dan Quinn might be the guy there. I mean, their defense needs to get fixed. They have a lot of issues on defense. I think he would do a great job with that. Or a guy like Leslie Frazier. I mean, I think that would be the way they would go. I mean, I don't know what their thought process is there, but they have Kirk Cousins for at least another year or two. And, eventually I think they're going to have to go in a different direction, but that's just my 2 cents with that.
Now, well, give me your 2 cents on the Raiders situation, Steve.
I think they keep their coach. I don't see how you get rid of him at this point. I think that would be a huge mistake. I know they want a splash name, and he's not a splash kind of guy, but what he's done in a limited time there, and he got them into the playoffs. I think you stick with them, for at least the next year or two. He seems to have the locker room. The players seem to believe in what he's doing there, and they're playing hard for him, and that's what you look for. You look for a guy. You go Dan Campbell. I mean, the Lions struggled terribly this year, lost all those close, heartbreaking games, but they played their hearts out for that guy, and that's why I think he's a really good choice to remain, and he should.
All right, so when we put things in perspective, I know Mr. Miami Dolphin Greg Fuchs, there's only 3 coaches, I believe, in their history that left with winning records. One was Don Shula, Jimmy Johnson, and Dave Wannstedt. And I know Bill Parcells went out there and said that if Stephen Ross was taking over the franchise, he was leaving when Wayne Huizenga sold the franchise. So that, to me, constitutes a culture problem in Miami. I know Dan Campbell was obviously 5 wins and 7 losses in an interim stint there, but it may have turned out well that he went out there and aligned with Sean Payton to land a Lions job. So when we put this whole show into perspective, and I know we've thrown a lot out there, and a lot of things are going to play themselves out over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to give each and every one of you, a final word on any particular thing that we've talked about. And I'm going to start off with Greg Fuchs. Go ahead, Greg.
I got 2 quick ones. I love John's point about if Dallas loses on Sunday, that may be the end of Mike McCarthy. And they got 2 assistant coaches there who could be a very good fit. In regards to the Dolphins, I mentioned earlier, I would fire Stephen Ross if you could. When it comes to organizations, I think stability is incredibly important. And the Dolphins have been just the revolving door of general managers, coaches, assistant coaches. I think most of that falls on Stephen Ross's shoulders. So hopefully he hires the right guy this time. That's why I'm sort of hoping it's Doug Peterson, because he's got some cachet. His word will mean something. He's got head coaching experience. Other than that, I would go with Dayball.
Okay, Rick Curti, I'm turning it over to you.
Well, I missed Chicago, so for Chicago, I'm gonna go with Jim Caldwell. I think he'd be a good fit there. He could work with Fields, and he'll bring calmness there, especially with those fans who are not very happy right now. And I don't blame them. And I'm gonna switch one of my picks. I had Dan Quinn. I think I like Dan Quinn in Denver. I think I've heard that name a lot. For some reason they keep going with the defensive coach. I think they're making a mistake. And they need offense help. They need a quarterback, but want to stick with defense, I think Dan Quinn goes there. And I do think Bieniemy will be a head coach. I know we keep hearing his name a lot, but he's a great offensive coach, and I think he can possibly go to the Vikings. And I agree. I think Ross, he's a horrible owner. He's meddling, and his press conference I saw when they fired, it was just bad. He was just smirking and laughing, and it was all about control. And he had one way to go, and they had another way, and they just, he's a strong personality, and they got rid of him. And I do think he'll be back as a head coach soon. He's a great coach, and he didn't get a fair chance, just like Culley did after 1 year. That's a travesty what happened to him. But Texans, to me, and Jacksonville, probably the most two dysfunctional organizations right now. And I think Miami and the Giants are a little bit behind them right now.
Okay, John Shearer, go ahead. Give me some final thoughts.
Yeah, just to touch on the Brian Flores thing. First of all, Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, they were not fans of him. You saw Gesicki's role kind of limited to more than what it should have been. I know Gesicki kind of sent out like some cryptic messages after Flores got fired. He wasn't exactly upset about it. I know him and Parker, they're pretty happy about it. And just to touch on on Flores again, it's not just that him and Tua or him and Greer didn't get along. It was as a head coach and a new head coach. You can't have three offensive coordinators in 2 years, basically. That's what he had, 3 offensive coordinators in the last 2 years. Co-coordinators this year, which is just stupid, first of all. That's a dumb idea. Josh Boyer, the guy you said they should keep in mind that Boyer had one of the worst defenses in the league the first half of the season when they were on that losing streak. And the only reason that they got back to being elite was Brian Flores was calling the plays on the defensive side of the football whenever they went on that winning streak the entire time. So remember that. Boyer couldn't get the job done with that defense. They had the same defense. Flores did an amazing job. So just keep that in mind that Flores the staff that he hired, Boyer, couldn't do his job. The offensive coordinators couldn't do their job. The offensive line coaches, like these guys that he hired, could not do their jobs. And as a coach, if you do not have stability with your staff that you hire, you're a newer coach, you don't last very long in the NFL. That's just how it works. So that's something that people don't really talk about, but he could not get his staff right. If you can't get your staff right, typically you don't last long.
Fair enough. Okay, Mel Farr.
I think he was trying to get his staff right. Obviously, I think he wanted to make a change. He was trying to get his staff right, but he was doing something right because he won 7 games in a row. And
yes, because he coached the defense, not the guy that he hired. Which, I mean, you hired a guy that can't do his own job.
I mean, sometimes, Dan Campbell, he never called plays before, but he didn't like the way that Anthony Lynn was calling plays, and he decided to call the plays because his job was dependent upon that. So that's why he did that. Now they decided to part ways because that's not what Anthony Lynn came there for. He didn't come there to be co-offensive coordinator or do all the game plan stuff and not call the plays on Sunday. That's not what he went there for. But out of this whole cycle, the thing that's been in my head, and I've been looking at this, and it's totally kind of off subject a little bit, but all the different coaching hires and I've been looking at the opportunities or the lack thereof. I don't know how many African-American head coaches there are in Division I football, probably less than 40, I would guess, in FBS. And you look in the NFL, 78% of the players are Black. We got 1 Black head coach. Now, why is that? Is it because of because they can't do the job? Is it kind of the same old stigma that was around as far as African Americans being able to play safety or being able to play middle linebacker or being able to play center or even the quarterback position? That's kind of now we're kind of seeing that that we do have the ability to play the quarterback position. So why is it that these head coaching jobs, and these are good jobs, don't seem to go to African Americans? Are there not enough in the pipeline? We keep
How
talking
many
about.
how many owners are African American?
Well, we understand that. I understand that.
I'm just saying, like, that's probably why, because it's a it's a rich
little
white
boy.
man's club. I mean, to be
Absolutely.
honest, like that's how unfortunately it is.
I understand that.
And it should change, but
I understand that. So I mean that's a great comment, great observation. But we kind of hired. That's kind of how Mike McCarthy got hired. Him and Jimmy. I mean, him and Jerry. Good. Hey, they look alike. They think alike. They're comfortable with one another. There's a certain comfort level. You can really relax and be who you are with somebody that kind of looks like you. Versus somebody comes in there looks like me. Can you really relax and be who you are? Do you have to worry about selling me? Do you have to worry about serving me fried chicken? If I come over to your house, am I going to be offensive because you served me fried chicken with some hot sauce and some collard greens? When you can give it to Mike McCarthy and not have a problem, not even worry about it. But you might have to worry about whether or not you offended me in a certain way because that's what you served me in a red pop. So that's kind of, I just look at it, I'm like, man, these are some great jobs that these guys are getting. They pay very, very good money and not a lot of it. And I'm talking about the college game. The NFL jobs, is 32 of them. There's tough. It's tough. I understand that. And you got ownership that you have to deal with. I understand that. But the college level, those are some good jobs too. The Oklahoma job's a good job. USC job, good job. LSU jobs, good job. All these jobs that came up. Florida job, good job. A lot of good jobs came up, and there wasn't a lot of mention of an African American person getting that opportunity. That's kind of my little two cents.
typically their leash is shorter too. I've
Oh, that's
noticed,
fine.
like Cully.
Cully was fired before he even got hired. I mean,
Yeah.
I never
You're
saw
right.
that coming, but you knew that wasn't going to last because he was set up to fail. You get there.
Let me add a little insight.
All of a sudden, Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be there anymore. He was set up to fail.
Most coaches wouldn't have won 4 games in that
I
situation.
thought he had a successful year.
Let me add a little insight to the Cully situation when I read up on it. Signed a 5-year contract and 2 of those years were guaranteed. So I think that in terms of getting paid, I think that probably summarizes everything you guys said, that Cully, to me, unfortunately got the wrong.
So then he knew, and that's even worse.
Right. Well, I mean, those are the numbers. He signed a 5-year deal, 2 of them guaranteed. What else?
I heard that. I heard he went on the radio though and said he had a 4-year deal, or his contract was, and the money was guaranteed. So I don't know, but I did hear that.
Yeah,
There is
he didn't.
There
have
is a
any-
little bit of karmatic justice, right? I mean, the Texans now owe $17 million to him for firing him, and they paid a 3rd-round draft pick last year to get him from the Ravens, and they owe another 3rd-round pick to the Ravens this coming draft. So there's a little bit of karmatic justice, going against the Texans because they got rid of a guy they shouldn't have got rid of. Just saying.
Okay. All right, Steve.
In regards to the Texans, I mean, one of the guys we talked about earlier was Jim Caldwell, and I think he'd be a perfect fit there. But I don't think Caldwell wants anything to do with Houston. I wouldn't want to go there. I mean, that place is a disaster right now, and that's why I think they're going to go outside the not the organization, but outside the big realm of the retreads that we keep talking about. But yeah, I mean, we see this every year a lot, and it's the same owners. It seems like year after year, they hire a guy and then they don't give him enough time to turn their organization around. And, that's why they seem like they're constantly failing. But I agree with Mel. I mean, again, you look at these African-American coordinators, why aren't they getting jobs? I mean, we've seen a lot of these guys who've been head coaches fail numerous places, and they haven't been, successful. Why not give one of these guys a shot? And, guys like Leslie Frazier, Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles had a horrible situation with the Jets. And, the GM there just absolutely hamstrung him because they refused to spend any money. And, that was a absolute no-win situation. And, he took his defense last year to the Super Bowl. I thought that was the strength of the Bucs. We all talked about Brady and the offense, but that defense in the Super Bowl, Kansas City scored 9 points. So,
Right.
that's Todd Bowles' defense. I think, teams need to start being a little more patient with some of these guys. I mean, the situation with the Giants, I thought was, again, Joe Judge needed to go, but so did the GM. I think their GM needs to go in Miami. And, obviously he's entrenched there. And that's going to be tough for them because you're going to bring in a new head coach in Miami and he has to get along with the GM. And that's not going to be easy.
Well,
as an owner, you can't, sometimes I think ownership, they kind of feel the pressure from the fans. And, you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my lifetime, they've had 3 head coaches in my lifetime. That's Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and now Mike Tomlin. If you're a head coach, that's the type of franchise you want to go to, yep, that they're going to give you the resources that you need. And they're also going to be patient with you. Understand that every year you're not going to make the playoffs, but boy, you sure are going to try. I mean, Mike Tomlin, he's done a phenomenal job. He's never had a losing season. And
an amazing thing about, you talked about the Steelers, and I know we're going back a long time ago, but Chuck Noll's first year, they were 1-13. And the owner of the Steelers gave him a bonus at the end of a 1-13 season because he was so happy with the way the direction of the team was going, and on a 1-13 team. That would never happen today.
Well,
never.
You're talking about the Roonies. What can I tell you? So that they're
But I mean, that tells you all you need to know about ownership.
Exactly.
Yeah, but as owners, you can't second guess yourself all the time. I mean, you got to make a decision. You got to stick with it. And sometimes it's going to be rough. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes, they're going to, the fans and media, they're going to be taking their shots at you. But you just have to be firm in your conviction and your belief and see it all the way through. Every time you change general managers and coaches, you change philosophy for your team. You totally, so not, you fire coaches, they get rid of coaches, but really players are the one that get coaches fired because the players didn't perform. So the new coach is going to come in, they're going to gut that whole locker room up. They're going to get new players in there because they figure they can't win with the same guys the other guy was losing with. That's kind of how the thing works. Then your scouting department, you change all that stuff. So now you're not going to those same little cubby holes that you went to 10 years ago to find these diamonds in the rough. That's what the Steelers have done. They've had that kind of continuity for 50 years, 55 years since I've been alive.
Yeah, that is unheard of. Let me add a couple of points here to what we're doing before we wrap up the show. Number one, I was reading some transcripts from the Detroit Lions, and one of the questions that was asked to Brad Holmes was about Dan Campbell calling the plays. Remember, Dan Campbell got a 6-year deal. Okay. So consequently, they were playing hard like he has. Hey, listen, I don't care if he calls the plays, it's his football team. What else do I need to say? Item number one. Number two, okay, let's go to Tampa Bay for a moment. When Bruce Arians retires, I believe that the ultimate successors will either be Todd Bowles or Byron Leftwich. One of those two guys will take over for Arians. That's what I think. Eric Bieniemy, I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I do believe that at some point his opportunity will come along. In terms of Jacksonville, obviously a bit closer to that situation. While Byron Leftwich would be the popular choice there, I do believe that what you guys are saying, the veteran way to go, you either go Jim Caldwell and you go with even Bill O'Brien or Doug Peterson. But the one person who really does have to stay there in the Jacksonville situation needs to be Darrell Bevell, because Darrell Bevell, what I saw last weekend up in Jacksonville, the way he connects with Trevor Lawrence, you want to keep your coordinators intact. And if you've got a good working relationship between your defensive coordinator and your offensive coordinator, Bevell, and obviously the defensive coordinator with Jacksonville, you need to stay. You don't need too much of a shake turnover. And as for the Miami Dolphins, okay, I think Tua Tagovailoa is a good quarterback. And I said a good quarterback. I don't think that he's a long-term answer. I've watched him enough and I don't totally believe in him. We all know Justin Herbert was a better choice. But again, that internal rough between the two. So there again, the dysfunction, well, the lack of winning coaches over a sustained period speaks for itself. Now, the only thing I'll say about Brian Flores is this, okay? You know, did he learn enough his first time around to warrant that second chance to get it right? Whatever mistakes he made, if he gets his second chance, what did you learn, Brian, from your first situation to make you better? Once upon a time, folks, okay, Bill Belichick got fired by the Cleveland Browns. How did it work out the second time around with New England? Okay, Patriots Nation, I don't need to answer that question, and neither do you. So there's no crime in losing your job the first time around, as long as your second opportunity is a lot better than the first. And yes, there's enough good African-American coaches out there. And I said at the top of the hour, okay, that I do believe a bunch of these are going to get filled by African-Americans. I really do. Where we shuffle the deck is anybody's guess based on philosophical right there. So I think we really, I hope that we've gotten everybody an opportunity to think from a lot of different perspectives. Each and every one of you did an outstanding job contributing to this show. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy broadcast because there's a lot to pack in. Don't worry, it only gets easier the next 2 or 3 weeks. Not, okay, it isn't. But at least hopefully we'll be able to make some sense out of it as these openings get filled, both the general manager as well as the coaches. So there's a lot to talk about. And every one of you tonight brought something to the table. And I'm eternally grateful for what each and every one of you brought. Because you know what? Our goal on these shows is to make people think. And I'd like to think we accomplished that objective. With that said, John Shearer, obviously you're new to this whole thing. So our customary way we do things, we get everybody, let people know how they get a hold of them. We're going to wait on you for a moment. Greg Fuchs, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, right, for South Florida Tribune. So you can go to www.southfloridatribune.com. You can also find me on Twitter at gfuchs, at Gregory Fuchs. And my rhetorical question, by the time we meet next Thursday, how many of these positions will be filled?
All right, Rick Curti.
You can contact me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. My email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB and Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti.
John Shearer.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, BlueHawks13. You can find me Sideline Sports Network. You can find us on DBNA television. We record Tuesday nights, 8:30 Eastern time, and then we're on DBNA television every morning, 4 a.m. You can also find me on the Sports Arena, which is on Sideline Sports Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 Eastern time, which Scott was on there yesterday, and he was on our Sideline Sports show on Tuesday. So we have an assortment of shows. You can find us anywhere you look for Sideline Sports Network.
And I know one of your co-hosts, Eric Wilson, and you and I and Eric had a really wonderful show. And obviously we'll be introducing our audience, hopefully with Eric Wilson and Jacob Malik at some point. But meanwhile, John, obviously you're my first point of contact. Now, Farr, you have an event coming up pretty soon, so you get to promote that and then some. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can follow me on all the social media at Mel Farr Jr. And we do have our annual high school showcase that's for seniors in high school who do not receive a Division I scholarship. They have an opportunity to showcase their talents in front of Division II, Division III, and NAIA schools. It's a one-day event. It's going to be at 7 o'clock is registration at Detroit Country Day School in Michigan. And if you need more information on it, you can get information at melfar.org, and that can lead you to the website where you can sign up either as one of the kids who wants to go to the camp, or either one of the schools that wants to participate and take a look at some great talent out of the Metro Detroit area.
Very good, Mel. All right, Steve.
All right. Hey, it's getting chilly out here. I'm gonna have to go inside the house. It's probably 70 degrees now.
Well,
But
you're
you find me.
Horrible.
You're not getting a whole lot of sympathy from those guys north, but go
It's
ahead.
30 right now in Charlotte.
Yeah. But you can find me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I still write for PatsFans.com. I'm also a national security columnist for 1945.com if you're into politics and military affairs. So I'm always on there. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all that other stuff, and looking forward to a great schedule of football games this weekend.
All right, just so you know, folks, these broadcasts are simulcast. When I say simulcast, I mean exactly that. You're obviously watching them on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our show via the YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything but a click. Okay. If you want to hear it audio, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find these shows on www.southfloridatribune.com. You can also track us on Twitter at Tribune South. South Florida Tribune has a Facebook page, and it also has an Instagram page. So you can find us in a lot of different ways. You want to email us, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. I do want to give a kudos to Candy Ebling, Morgan Roth, who does an outstanding job putting all of our content up on the website, does a marvelous job with all the shows. And, you know, to me, she's our unsung hero, because without her getting a lot of this stuff done, you know, we can't get it out there as efficiently as we do. So kudos to Candy. She don't have any stress this weekend because the Green Bay Packers are in the bye this weekend. But, you know, she wasn't overly thrilled that the Lions beat the Packers. Sorry, Candy, but, you know, Aaron Rodgers only played a half a game. So, but meanwhile, guys, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed everything that we accomplished today. John, we definitely look forward to bringing you back on at a later date for sure. Your first act was a very good one. And once again, folks, as we close this show, okay, I enjoy the contrasting opinions. That's what makes the show so pleasant, where everybody has a voice. So on behalf of Greg Fuchs, John Shearer, Rick Curti, Mel Farr Jr., Steve Balestrieri, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Hope you have a pen and paper, a lot of patience, and a Rubik's Cube, because I hope you get an awful lot on here, because this is one show that you should listen to a lot, because you're going to get a lot of good information. And our goal, in the eyes of Tony Kornheiser, will say, let's see if we can do better the next time. Only difference is we'll have more information. So good night, everybody. Enjoy your football weekend, and God bless.
Night.
All right.